I have some carding I need to get done today, so I thought I'd bring you along, show you how I do it. That's where I keep all my wool that's dyed. And I was working on some purples yesterday. Today I want to do some greens and blues because I always want to do greens and blues. And I want to do a little bit of a natural, like a neutral, a lot of white with little flecks of different shades of brown to give a neutral background for the next project I want to do. I have it in my head. I have an idea of what color yarn I want, so I need to get that made. One of the very few that I haven't dyed myself, I got from the mill, but it's a nice neutral tan. I'm going to mix that with some white. It's my big box of neutrals. All right, down here I keep a lot of my add-ins. So I'm going to grab bamboo and a little bit of sparkle because you just never know when you might need to add some sparkle to something. And I've got some nice neutral alpaca blend there. Oh, more of that. And then I have some mohair locks. Those were actually from my goats from years ago, and they make beautiful, beautiful yarn. Mohair adds a beautiful sheen to a finished yarn, and this is silk. I don't know if I really need much silk. Let me grab, let's see, I have some like silvery taupe kind of color. I think that'll work. What's going on in here? Oh, that's some browns. Oh, there's some more locks in here. I'm kind of organized until I realize I'm not organized, and I find little bits and pieces all over the place. There we go. So I have some idea of what kind of yarn I want for this next weaving project, and I'm going to play around with some of my wools until I get just the right blend, and then I'll get to spin hopefully tomorrow. But first things first, I'm going to clean my carder, and I use just a little paddle brush that came with the carder. Go against the fabric, pulling out all the wool, and it might look like I'm being fairly aggressive, but it's a very gentle touch and a rocking motion like this, just to lift it up. Pull the wool off, and I have a Brother drum carder. I think I got the medium coarse fabric. Kind of wish I had gotten the fine fabric, but this is working just fine. My past drum carder was a Fancy Kitty. I also recommend those. Now, the Liquor In, the little drum over here that pulls the wool in, is still pretty dirty, but I actually just leave that. It seems to build up. It builds up wool on it to a maximum amount. So if you clean it off, it's just going to fill back up to that point. If you leave it kind of grungy, then it doesn't seem to pull more onto it, and more then gets moved onto the large drum. Maybe that's all in my head, but I know a lot of fiber artists don't clean their Liquor In, so I don't either. And I do want it pretty clean, my drum pretty clean though, because I was carding purples, and now I want to do some neutrals, and I don't want those two to cross. If I'm doing like the same color family, then I actually don't clean my carder all that well. Sorry, I keep looking for I keep a little cup for extras. This is usually like the really dirty stuff I put in that, and then I have a little box over here. I have this one that I keep scraps in, and I keep it down right below my carder as well. And I will take these and make a fun art yarn or a fun art bat eventually, and then spin it into an art yarn. So there's very, very little waste in the studio. So I'm going to start with this neutral that I want to make, and it's going to be mostly white with some different shades of taupe and beige, and maybe a dark brown running through it here and there, sort of in chunks. That's what I have in my head. This base that I'm using, that most of the wool in my shop is a Corriedale. It's a Corriedale top that I buy from World of Wool in the UK. And it just is a really good all-around, all-purpose wool. It's not as fine as merino, so it actually is a little bit more forgiving when I dye it. And it's not as expensive as merino. I always compare things to merino because that seems to be the standard for what most people want to spin, especially beginning spinners. They learn on, maybe even learn to spin on a merino, but then they seem to graduate to the merino. The merino's the end all. In my book, the merino's not the end all. I love merino, and I think it has a place in this world, but it is not my everyday go-to. Corriedale is perfectly fine. The Corriedale breed is actually a relative of the merino, but not quite as fine and a little bit longer staple. So I'm just taking that top and fluffing it out and opening it up so that I can see through it a little bit, so it's nice and airy, and laying it across the width of my drum carder, and then cranking over. I'm old school and I don't have an automatic drum carder. Maybe someday. Suck that in. And right on the edges, I don't want the wool to come down into my gears. So every once in a while, if it's getting too close to the edge, I'll pull it off and just lay it back onto the main drum. And if I see a big chunk over here on the liquor in, I'll pull it off and I'll add that back in. Now that I have a good base of that cream, I'm going to start adding a little bit of color. This is also Corriedale, but it was dyed at the mill. I didn't dye it myself. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Depends on what color it is and what mood I'm in. So this one I'm going to just add in chunks to the top so I can control how much is in there. And I want chunky pools of color throughout the bat. I don't want it completely even. And this sort of becomes a moot point later on because I'm going to do a second pass, and that does even things out, but it makes me feel better when I do it by hand. Now, I've got these pretty mohair locks. These were from my goats years and years ago. So I had Angora goats. Angora goats make mohair. Angora rabbits make Angora. So it depends on what kind of Angora animal you have as to what fiber it creates. And when you're dealing with locks, I like to pop them open, just pull them apart a little bit. These were washed right after the goats were shorn. So they're nice and clean, even though they're quite a few years old. I think they're probably 5 years old at this point. They're still nice and clean, ready to go. And I don't, so like this one, see how nice and thin it is? It's still got that lock structure. I'm not going to open that one up. The teeth will a little bit, but I'm going to leave some of them in their lock structure just to make the yarn interesting once I spin it. And I'm just dropping this right onto the drum carder. Locks are notorious for coming right back off onto the liquor end, so just pick them back up off the liquor and put them right back on. So that little guy, he's going to go right in. That's pretty. Fluff. I am mildly allergic to mohair, so I don't use it all that often. That's probably why I have 5-year-old mohair left sitting around the house. But it's so pretty. So if I start coughing, I'm sorry, a little bit of asthma kicking up. Put that right on. Fluff, fluff, fluff. It's like a little silk cloud. It's so pretty. I'm just watching the drum where there's spots that don't have as much fiber, and that's where I'm putting my hand down to let that catch. So like right here, let it catch there. And spread things around a bit. Now, I'm going to sandwich all that with some more white. And it is getting to be pretty full. So I'm going to push my comb down a little bit, and I'm going to get my slicker brush and run it backwards across the drum. And it packs everything in nicely so I can add even more fiber. And as I do this, you can see the liquor has grabbed the next cordial, and that's fun. You can do it all together. Then I like to stop and run my finger along the place where the little bar is to help take it off, just to feel how packed it is and how much wool I've got on there. Sometimes I pre-weigh the wool, and I know exactly how much I've got going on there and if it's full, but right now I'm just kind of winging it. So I can tell that a little bit more can go on. I'll grab a little bit more. And I'm watching right here where the liquor meets the big drum and making sure that that wool is still going onto the big drum from the liquor. And if it's not, if it's just rolling right over to the small drum, which is the liquor in, then I know that this is probably too full or it's at maximum capacity and I can't stuff any more on there. But that went on just fine, so that's great. I'm going to lift that up and I'm going to use my doffer stick and remove it. I've watched people that can go all the way across and lift this up in one beautiful swoop. I'm not one of those people. And I think it's because they usually use shorter fiber wools or shorter staple length wools like merino. But mine's a little longer, as mentioned before. And so it can get kind of packed in there and a little tight sometimes. Oh, I said all that and that one came off really nicely. Never mind. I'm one of those people. There we go. And I hold on to my doffer as I go because every once in a while the wool will stick in there and I just pop it back out to keep it going. There we go. Now this is a beautiful bat ready to spin, and I'm going to split it and I'm going to run it through again just to make it a little bit smoother and more even. In my head, this is the background yarn for a piece that I'm going to embroider on top of. So it needs to be a little on the subtle side. I do a lot of art yarns and kind of big poofy stuff and colorful yarns. And that's great, except if you have too much of that, they all fight with each other. And I need this one to be subtle and in the background so that all my other stuff can bounce off of it. If I need to do a whole bunch of bats, if I need like a large quantity, quite often what I'll do is do a first pass of like 4 bats. I would have like 4 bats that I've done once through the drum carder, and then I would split them all like this into thirds or fourths and mix them all up, so that when I do a second batch, you're getting a quarter of each of those first batches, and that just makes a more homogeneous color across all 4 of them. And so once you start spinning, and even when I spin, I might even grab a strip from one of the bats and a strip from another bat and spin those together or back to back or ply them together, so that you start getting one cohesive yarn across a lot of wool. It's like little tricks that cottage industry artists have to do because we don't have giant machines that can do huge batches all at once. It's probably cooperating with me coming off easily because I don't have any add-ins in here. Silk and bamboo like to hold on to the drum carder a little bit more. Now, I think even in the manual it says not to do this, so do it with caution, but I take my doffer and I'll go at the same angle as the teeth, along the row of the teeth, so that I can get back under the wool and pop it up. If you go straight across, you're going to bend your teeth, but if you go at a slight angle and go in the same row as the teeth are presented, then it's pretty safe. I've never really bent any of my teeth, so I don't worry about it. All right, so there we go. I've got a nice creamy, fluffy bat, and I roll them into little, I call these bun buns, my little bun bun. That's how I store my bats, little bun buns. And I'm going to make a couple more in different shades of browns so that I have a wide variety to play with when I spin. I think for this project, I'm going to spin up a whole bunch of neutrals and then see how I want to lay them out once they're yarn. But I hope you learned something, or at least had fun watching me play on my drum carder today. I might let the film roll and give you a little behind the scenes of what the rest of it's going to look like.